For years, researchers have studied the effects that repeated blows to the head have on athletes in pro football, hockey, soccer, and other sports. Now, as Zhang Yang tells us, they're turning their attention to players who start as early as grade school.
Researchers at Boston University are conducting the first major study of CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, in athletes who died before their 30th birthday. CTE is the degenerative brain disease linked to repeated hits to the head. Researchers recently released findings based on the study of the brains of 152 athletes. 63 of them, more than 40%, had CTE. 48 of them played football, most of them no higher than high school or college. Some started playing tackle football when they were as young as 6. The main sports for others in the study included hockey, soccer, and wrestling. Some of the parents of these young athletes told the New York Times about the changes they saw in their children.
His whole person started to change.
It was an abrupt change.
He was a different person.
He wasn't the same kid.
He became unrecognizable.
Just a fragment of himself.
He wasn't Wyatt.
And we couldn't figure it out.
And unfortunately, we couldn't recognize possibly what was happening with him until it was too late.
That video is part of an interactive story in the New York Times website. Times reporter John Branch worked on the project. John, we heard those parents talk about these changes that they saw, this unrecognizable children. Did any of them make the connection to football?
Yeah, most of them did not, and that's not uncommon. I think it's because they're so young that they weren't assuming that that was the cause of their problems. You know, these kids were 18, 19, maybe into their early 20s. And so kids are going through a lot of changes at that time anyway. So they wonder if they were just typical changes that we see, or if the kids were now using drugs or alcohol, maybe even just running in with the wrong crowd. They couldn't make sense of it, fortunately, really until it was too late.
And not only could the parents not make sense of it, some of the athletes couldn't make sense of it.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, one of the clips, I believe, you played with Bramwell family, and Wyatt Bramwell did not tell anybody this until he recorded a video before his suicide, in which he said that he heard voices in his head, demons in his head, that his life had been living hell because of what he assumed were the concussions that he had absorbed over several years of youth and high school football.
CTE, of course, can't be diagnosed until after death. They can examine the brain after death. These parents donated their children's brains for research because they were seeking answers. What was their reaction when they got the confirmation that yes, their child had CTE?
Yeah, I think reactions are really mixed. Of course, I think there's a little bit of horror and regret. They think, "Oh my gosh, what have I done to my child? What did I do to my child? What could we have done differently to prevent this?" You know, for the most part, they're the ones who their kids into football. Some of them coached their kids in football. And now to find out that they had died and that they had CTE tells them that all the things that they thought that they were doing right for their kids may have actually been one of the causes of death for their kids. Also, when they get the diagnosis, there is a strange bit of relief because of all the answers that they could not quite get or find that they were searching for through doctors or therapists. Now they know that there's a scientific explanation, at least in their minds, of what happened to their children.
You talk about what they could have done differently. You also ask the parents if knowing what they know now, they would have still had their child or let their child play football. The first couple we're going to hear from are the parents of Hunter Foraker, who played at Dartmouth and died when he was 25.
If we had the knowledge today, Hunter would have never played football, period. If I have a grandson, he will not play football. It's not worth the risk.
When I drive by a football field and see these young kids in helmets and pads, it just breaks my heart.
Delaying the onset of contact is what I would have championed. And I still love football. We still have a son that plays football.
Does it hurt that I lost my son? 100% it does. But if you were to ask me today how I feel, like I said, I have grandsons now that love football and are playing contact football before high school. I would be willing to say that I would do it again.
That last couple we should note is the parents of Miko Loxley, and his father, Michael Loxley, is the head football coach at the University of Maryland. Interesting division there. Some saying I would never have let my child play football. Others saying my grandchildren are playing tackle football. What do you make of that?
Yeah, Michael Loxley's a fascinating case because he coaches football. He coaches 100 or more young men to play this game, knowing that his son had CTE. And to Michael and to many of these others, it's a strange calculation, an impossible calculation between risk and reward. While many of us might say, oh, of course, we would never let our kids play football knowing that they might end up with CTE, families, even these families, are a little bit more torn than that because they wonder, or they look at all the rewards that football can offer. You know, the things like the camaraderie, the physical fitness, the sense of community, especially in small towns in America. They don't want their kids to be ostracized in certain places for not playing football or not being part of it. They love the game. And so they're trying to balance those kinds of rewards for the risk. And the tricky thing with CTE is we don't know exactly what the risks are. We don't know if a child who plays high school football has a 1 in 100 chance of developing CTE, or is it 1 in 20, or is it 1 in 10? To some, no matter what the risk is, that's too much. But to others, they're trying to figure out where that lies and what's best for their own children.
Do you think this is going to lead to changes in youth football, or is the sort of the cultural pull of football in America just too great?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think at least having a conversation, and I think there's a push more and more for having these conversations about whether children, especially before high school, should play tackle football. But researchers behind this believe that there's a correlation between the number of years that somebody plays tackle football and the likelihood of them getting CTE. And most kids never go on to college, and certainly not onto the pros. They would see that number limited by at least not having people play or kids play tackle football until, say, high school. In the case of Wyatt Bramwell, who took his own life at age 18, he played 10 years of tackle football. Would it have been different had he played 3 years only in high school? We don't know exactly. But that's the kind of limitations that I think a lot of people would like to see we're going to be talking about in the next few years.
John Branch of the New York Times on an important subject to be talking about. Thank you very much.
Thank you.